And to help us get started today, I'm going to introduce Dr. Marcus Collins and our partner and keynote speaker, Bill Benjamin. Dr. Marcus Collins is an award-winning market and culture translator. He's the author of the best-selling book, For the Culture, The Power Behind What We Buy, What We Do, and What We Want to Be. And Bill, he's our very own. He has over 30 years of business experience to provide his expertise on leadership, performance, emotional intelligence, and the last 8% with diverse groups in many high-pressure environments. Clients of his include U.S. Marines, NASA, Intel, Marriott, Goldman Sachs, and even surgeons. Bill, I'll pass it over to you. You're muted, Bill.
Rookie mistake. You think I'd know that trick by now. Hey, great to be here with everyone. Marcus, pleasure to be here with you. We are two wild and crazy guys when it comes to talking about culture. I just dated myself as a Gen Xer. For you younger kids, that's a Saturday Night Live sketch. Marcus knows about that group too. So welcome, glad to have you here.
And it's glad to be here. I feel like we were just together last week, sort of wetting the palate on what this can be and what this will be. And I think that we've got a lot in store for everyone with us. So let's jump right in.
We do. We did a LinkedIn Live, for those that don't know, last week. And we spent 50 or 20 minutes, and we had so much fun. We could have kept going, and here we are. We're going to keep going. All right, so what are we going to cover today? For those of you that are like me, that are linear, by the way, Adrian didn't mention, but in my background, I have degrees in mathematics and computer science. And now I teach culture and emotional intelligence. So yes, there is a story there, which we may get to at some point. First of all, we're going to talk about what is culture. And my man, Dr. Marcus Collins, wrote this great book called For the Culture. If you haven't read it, it's so interesting. It's a great read. He's going to talk about that and the influence the culture has on behavior, literally every behavior we all ever exhibit. Adrian mentioned this thing called the last 8%. What exactly is that? Then we promised to talk about this idea of why you're not a family. So, those first 3 points really set up this idea of what does it mean to be a family culture and why that isn't everything you want to be. And then finally, we're going to talk about this idea of balancing care and accountability. And for those of you that know IHHP, my company, that's where our work in emotional intelligence fits in. So those of you that know us, know our work in emotional intelligence, which this whole culture work really builds on. So Marcus, I want to turn it over to you to talk a bit about this idea of what is culture.
Absolutely. And like you, Bill, I was an engineer undergrad. So I'm always sort of fascinated by why things are the way they are. And more importantly, not just why things are the way they are, but I'm always looking for the systems because in everything, there is a system. What's the underlying physics, the underlying system that drive things forward? And what a perfect and worthy focus than culture to study these systems, because culture is one of the words that we often use. You know this so well, Bill. It's a word that we use it all the time. Like marketers say, let's get our ideas out into culture. Business leaders say, what's going on in culture? So our ideas are informed by culture. HR folks say, we have a foosball table in the kitchen. We have a great culture here, right? Culture, 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 culture. But if you ask 5 people to define culture, you get 55 different answers. And that's a problem. Because if we can't define this thing concretely, how do we ever fully harness its power? If we cannot, if we can't capture a concrete Rosetta Stone by which we talk about culture, then it renders us unable to actually leverage its power. So let's talk about what culture is. Let's give some definition to culture. And again, culture's complication or its challenge in finding the right vernacular to describe it is actually indicative or inherent to the abstract nature of culture. It's all around us. It's in everything that we do, right? And explaining culture is sort of like explaining water to a fish. It's in everything, right? Mm-hmm. So how might we describe this thing that seems so amorphous and so esoteric, such that we're able to operationalize it? Well, my academic repertoire sits squarely in the world of sociology. So I tend to look at those early sociologists, those founding fathers, to get some semblance of it. And typically I lean towards Emil Durkheim. Emil Durkheim talks about culture as a system of conventions and expectations that demarcate who we are and govern what people like us do, right? It's an operating system, as it were, that helps us carve out the place that we occupy in the world, but also dictate sort of what is expected of people like us. And this system is really a system of systems. In fact, let's show them what that looks like. So this system of systems that Emil Durkheim postulates in the late 1800s and later in the 1950s, 1960s, the 1960s, Raymond Williams, culture scholar, starts to add a bit more texture to this, a bit more meat on the bone as it is. And it's anchored in our identity, who we are. And our identity is massively complex. It's made up of multi hyphens that together make up who we are, right? And all is intersectionality, right? There's individual reference. I'm a professor. That's a part of my identity, is an individual referent. We have group references, like I'm in a fraternity, Phi Beta Sigma. That's part of my identity. I'm a father of two little girls, George and Ivy, who's sitting right over here. That is an abstract referent, right? And the alchemy of these monikers make up who I am. And because of who I am, I see the world a certain way. Right? I have a certain point of view about the world. That's why for some, a cow is leather, for others, a deity, and for some, it's dinner. But which one is it? It's all of those things, depending on who you are and how you see the world. So because of who we are, we see the world a certain way. Because we see the world a certain way, we navigate life a certain way, certain set of artifacts, behaviors, language, a shared way of life, right? That's why, if we were to think about, you're all good. If we were to think about and Alex and say, hey, Alex likes to run versus Alex, who is a runner. Which one is more inclined to run when it's cold, when she's tired, when it's rainy, and you don't want to do it? It's the one who identifies as Alex, right? Because of who we are, we see the world a certain way, then we navigate life a certain way, and then we express ourselves through shared work, what the literature refers to as cultural production, right? Art, literature, film, music, movies, stories, folklore, brands and branded products become ways in which we express ourselves. And the alchemy of these systems or systems make up our culture. And the same culture, the same cultural mechanisms that make up our consumption culture, that make our societal culture, are also at play in our organizational culture.
Yeah. And you know where that really hits home for me is like, for me, who we are, especially when I was first promoted as a manager. I was a high-performing individual contributor at a computer software company. And of course, what do you do with a high performer? You make them a manager.
That's right.
So my who I am is I'm a person that people like.
Yeah.
So my belief is, therefore, I don't do things that make people not like me.
That's right.
So behaviorally, then, I don't tell people things they don't want to hear. I don't give them difficult feedback. So that my brand becomes, I'm not someone who does tough things. I'm not someone who holds people accountable. I'm someone that's nice. I create a family culture, but I don't do the tough things. So, I mean, I live this. I get this. I love this model.
And that the distinction is so important because, before we get promoted, before we get recognized, we already feel like we're doing the work. You're like, I'm already skilled. I'm already great. Like I'm killing it. No one's seen it yet.
Promoted. Yeah.
And when people see it, we go, oh, they must like me.
Right.
I'm in their good graces. And we feel like the delta between where I am now and where I was really just that people imbued value in me.
Yeah.
And therefore I navigate my coming and goings inside the organization such that people still look at me favorably. So to your point, I dodge anything that would compromise or jeopardize that social capital that I created.
Yep.
Even though it actually leads to better outcomes to have the tough conversations, right? To have the tough feedback. So I skirt those things to maintain the social capital that I establish, because in my mind, the social capital is only the delta between where I was and where I am. And I want to stay where I am.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. For sure. No, I love this model.
And an interesting part about this is that like the scholarly leadership on cultural consumption abides by this, right? It completely underscores and supports this. But so is the same with the scholarly leadership on organizational behavior and workplace culture, right? Like, this idea of culture being a part of how we work dates back to the 16th century with merchants exchanging goods and services on the banks of the Black Sea, right?
Yeah.
That people realize that, oh, people from this region act differently than people in that region. So if you want to engage with them, you have to mimic or at least be mindful of their cultural characteristics, right? The way they see the world, which inform how they navigate the world. And so is the same later on in the 18th century or the 1800s rather, when Karl Marx was thinking about the structural implications
Yeah.
of work on our psychology.
Yeah.
Later still in the 1900s, Max Weber, again, the third founding father of sociology, looked at or interrogated the influence of our psychology on the workplace, that these things are kind of going forwards and backwards at the same time. And a lot of the religious views that people had became secularized into our work. And we pulled those ideologies and beliefs into the way that we worked, which completely underscores what we see here is that our identity and our beliefs anchor everything that we do, from the shopping malls to the grocery stores to the voting booths and to our workplace. So understanding beliefs and being able to interrogate what those beliefs are in our organizations are part and parcel to how we might be able to work together. And I know, like, from all the leaders you work with, the companies you work with, that has to be kind of replicated as you see that in different companies.
And I see so the opposite of like me being someone who I am is I'm liked is I've worked with surgeons and lawyers and military Marines where it's like, no, I get results. People do what they're told. And then that turns into, well, I don't care what they think. And then you've got a completely different fear-based hierarchical command and control culture, right? You've got the opposite of a family, right? And so, yeah, we see both in it, but it all starts with that who I am, how the psychology impacts behavior. Absolutely.
That's right. And what we find is that there are a few ways by which, these cultures, these beliefs, these ideologies are instilled. One is a finger down, where I'm going to break you down to build you up into the beliefs and ideologies of the institution, and therefore you abide by a shared way of life. The military is a perfect example of this. We're going to take you in, we're going to break you down and build you back up. And if you don't align, you got to get out, right? You get discharged dishonorably, mostly, right? Or another approach is that we hire people who are like us. That's the point out. So one is pointing down, the other is pointing out, like, oh, you see the road the way I do. Come work with us, right? So we are hiring people who are already of the tribe. They're already of the community. They see the world similarly. And you go, hey, just come do it with us. Like, do it together. Right? That's a pointing out. I point at you. You're like me. I think a Chick-fil-A is a great example of this, right? Chick-fil-A hires people who believe what the company believes. And what the company believes, its ideologies are exuded in how it treats its customers, how it's closed on Sunday, and the like. Then the third approach is pointing up. And that pointing up is pointing towards a North Star, a belief, what we aspire to be.
Right.
And the idea of the company there is that we are trying to inspire the people we hire to live up to those ideals, to live up to those beliefs and ideologies, such that they are demonstrated in what they do. You see companies like this. Toyota is a good example of this, or Zappos is a good example of this, is that we're going to preach the gospel in hopes of inspiring you to live up to these ideals. Each one of these three approaches are unique in their own manner, and they give you similar results, or they give you different results based on how what's most applicable and appropriate for you. But at their core, they're anchored in beliefs. And the better we understand that, the more likely we are to get the results we want to get. But it requires being able to operate against it, not just in the 92% of the time when things are great. Right. But it's that last 8%, where things get really tough. If we did ourselves again, Bill, I'll take you back to five guys from Boston, sang some great love songs, a lot of great dances, known as New Edition.
Hmm.
And he said, when things get tough, can you stand the rain? Right? It's those last
Yeah. Well,
8%, right? When
you're
things are
leading right
sunny,
in. You're leading right into the next topic
it's
because
those last 8%. Give it to them. Let's talk
yeah,
about those last 8%.
because if we talk about like where does culture actually get established, and there's a lot of myths about culture, and you're doing a great job of helping uncover some of those myths. But so what exactly is the last 8%? Well, you're getting the sense it's the hardest part of the things we have to do as humans. And initially when we conceptualized this, and my business partner, Dr. JP Fry, came up with this concept of a conversation. You've all been in that conversation where it's a tough conversation. You get 85, 90, 95% of the way there, and the other person starts reacting. And in our research, 68% of people in that moment, they step back. They
Mm,
don't really step in and say that last 5 or 10%, the part that really needed to be said. And so we did a research study of 34,000 people and determined that on average, it's 8% that people feel they leave unsaid in a difficult
mm,
conversation. So that's where the last 8% came from. But we fool ourselves that we had the conversation. The other person thinks we had the conversation, and we wonder why things aren't changing. As we workshopped it, people said, well, it isn't only tough conversations that are last 8% moments. There's tough decisions. There's the easy ones where everyone's agreeing and everyone's going to be happy and I'm not taking a risk. But then there's the ones where I don't know what's going to work out. I've never tried this before, or someone's not going to be happy. And we're going to come off the share now. And I know that when I used to, when I was first learning this, if I was making a decision, sometimes I made it based on who was going to scream the loudest, and I'd let them get their way. And so, as we look at these last 8% moments, people just said, God, there's many different times that I face when I feel that tension and anxiety. So Marcus, we were talking as I talked about this concept of the last 8%, well, what are some of the moments that come to mind for you?
Immediately, I think about during conversations where you have to give someone feedback. And I feel like if it's a 30-minute conversation, if it's a 30-minute conversation, the first 20 minutes are all superfluous. The first
25
five,
minutes, usually
we're
25
dan
minutes.
we're dancing around, just
Yeah,
dancing around. And they were like, well, let's get into this. And like we're kind of easing our way to it. And we're
yeah,
like, look, the clock is ticking, 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 ticking. We're almost there. We go, hey, just really quick, I'm gonna give you some I'm trying to get it fast and get out as soon as possible. Like
yeah,
we skirt around it.
yeah,
And as a result, I think that it leads to far greater peril
yeah.
to the organization because of how the trauma that it impacts on the worker and the muscle memory that it creates in the leader.
Yeah, absolutely. Like so an example that I've had, the very first time I ever gave somebody difficult feedback as a manager, they were just staring at me. And I thought, oh, this is going great. So I just kept going and I finished. And I realize now later, they were triggered and couldn't hear me, but I thought
Sure.
I had the conversation. The second time I ever gave somebody difficult feedback, I, I wasn't 2 minutes in when they started reacting, getting defensive. Then they're telling me it's all my fault, and now I'm on the other end of a difficult conversation. I'm getting defensive, and that didn't go well either. And then I figured I don't do well. I don't do well at these, so I just avoided them altogether.
That's
Right.
right.
So yeah, we've all had these tough conversations. By the way, for those of you that haven't tried this before, if you click on one of the videos of the folks that are here that are off video, if you click hide non-video participants, then you'll just see Marcus and I. So that was kind of the idea when we come off video, so you can see a little more of us. I think we all know that culture isn't just something that shows up in business and organizations. This culture, these last 8% moments, I mean, they show up in our personal lives. I have two teenage daughters, and right now, my 17-year-old daughter, she has a job where she works in a chiropractor's office, and she's working 3 nights a week, and she's in grade 11, so she's got SAT, she's got exams coming up, and it's just getting a bit overwhelming for her, and she wants to ask for Mondays off. And so she's actually decided that's what's best for her. It's been 2 weeks, and she hasn't asked yet, and she's avoiding. And she's telling herself all these things that are going to go wrong. He's going to be really upset. They're going to fire me. Like, it's just so natural, right? We do it in all parts of our lives.
I mean, I do it all the time with my wife. I go, man, So I tell her, Alex, that she's gonna lose it. Goodness gracious. So I sort of kind of keep it until the absolute last moment. And she's probably gonna fry me for saying this out loud. But the absolute last moment, just to try to mitigate what might be the collateral damage. And in doing so, actually make it worse. Right. And it's like, we fear what could be as opposed to leaning into what is.
And our good friend Ken Sterling from Big Speak, our mutual partner, he said, sometimes all the scenarios I'm telling myself of what will happen are way worse than actually what does happen. So all those
Absolutely.
stories we make up are way worse. Okay, why do we focus on these last 8% moments? Because of the cortisol effect. Because when there's tension, when there's pressure, when there's discomfort or uncertainty, cortisol gets released, which causes memories to sear in. So people will remember how you showed up in a last 8% moment. They don't remember what you're doing in the 92% of moments when everyone was getting along and the deadlines were being met. So this then becomes your reputation. And this is then what people model, especially for those of you that are leaders. But even if you're just a member on a team, people model the dominant behavior. So these last 8% moments matter more than others in terms of defining the culture of a team and an organization.
I mean, the cortisol essentially it's a brain drug. And your brain releases a drug so that your body responds in a way that's going to protect it. Like the job of the brain is to keep you alive by making predictions. And the brain releases cortisol so that your body knows how to respond, fight or flight. And
Exactly.
and cortisol in your system for a very brief moment can be helpful, right? Do I run or do I fight this thing off? But if cortisol is constantly dripping through your bloodstream on a daily basis, not only is it mentally exhausting, but actually physically it exerts. The physical exertion on your body actually leads you to getting sick, stressed. Physical sickness happens. So these things that we take for granted, this little last 8%, as it may look like quantitatively,
Yeah.
is disproportionate in its impact in the workplace environment and how we operate as workers, humans.
Yeah. But by the way, cortisol causes you to retain belly fat. Do I have everyone's attention now?
That's my excuse, Bill. That's my excuse. Too
Yeah,
much
I mean,
cortisol for
there's
the
so many
workplace.
reasons we don't want cortisol in our body. And coming back to this idea of a family culture, which we're going to talk about in just a moment, but in order not to have a family culture where you are stepping and having the tough conversations, you have to overcome that fear response, that wanting to avoid, which is overcoming those stress hormones. So, I mean, there's just so many reasons why we don't want that cortisol in our system.
And
Okay, so
Bill, what I love about the fact that you all focus so squarely on the last 8% and its impact on the body is that they impregnate these memories. And
mm,
memories aren't just,
yeah,
nostalgic. They aren't just sort of harken back to things that have happened, but the part of the brain that's responsible for tattooing memories to your cognitions, right? The amygdala, the hippocampus, these things are associated with part of the brain that's responsible for behavior. They're
yes,
responsible for how you feel, emotions, and ultimately decisions you make. It's called the limbic system,
it
right?
is.
So this system is a complex system of parts of the brain that are constantly sort of taking inventory of what you've experienced and telling your body to act this way when it happens to protect you. That's why when you hear a song on the radio from back in the day, you go, oh man, it takes me back. This
Yeah.
is exactly what's happening, right? These experiences, your
Or
body.
it takes me back to the day after I broke up with the girlfriend broke up with me, and that's the song that makes me remember.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. I hearken to four guys from Philadelphia, known as Boys to Men. I think of End of
yeah,
the Road. Remember my heart being broken,
yeah,
right? These things take us back. And the same things happen in that bad feedback you got from your manager, or how you felt when there was a layoff, or how you felt when you were moved off a project. And it's not the fact that you were moved. It's not the fact that you left the organization. It's the manner in which it happened.
yeah.
And we as leaders, we have some agency in this. We can impact this. We have control over it if we're willing to invest in the last 8%.
Yeah. I mean, I love that point about sort of the stored emotional memory, because another example of something that people in a family culture have trouble with is saying no to people. because they're going to be disappointed or they're going to be upset. And where that comes from is 20 years ago or some number of years ago, you said no to someone and they got upset. And that's now stored in your emotional memory. And now you don't want to do that. And so, yes, those emotional memories, those stored traumas, literally, and they live there. That's the cortisol effect. It literally lives there like it happened yesterday, even if it happened 20 years ago.
I mean, that's why my daughters have me wrapped around their finger. Like I
Yeah.
hear no from them. I go, okay, okay. I just cave. I just cave.
No, it's you're so right. But I really I'm so glad you brought that point up. Okay, so we kind of been dancing around this topic of family culture. I do want to get to that and bring that up. Okay, so there's two pillars of a culture, and why are you not a family? So what are the two pillars of culture? The first one is this idea of high connection and psychological safety. And most organizations, when they do culture work, when they do values work, they focus on this. And this is critical. There is a 8 to 10 year mega trend where there are not enough good people for the jobs you have open. This is not just some result of the pandemic. This is not going away. It may even be longer than 8 to 10 years. You absolutely have to retain and engage your best people. But most organizations, they forget the second pillar, and that is you need high courage. You need the ability to skillfully do hard things, to step in to those last 8% moments skillfully. So we took these two pillars and we created a culture map. And by the way, for those of you that are going to stay on until the end, we're going to tell you how you can get a copy of this culture map and an exercise you can do with your teams. We have courage on the left axis and connection on the bottom axis. So let's think about the top left-hand quadrant where you have high courage but low connection. That's the kind of environment I talked about earlier with your surgeons and your lawyers and your military people. That's a transaction. And by the way, not all surgeons, lawyers, and military people. So let me be careful about making broad statements, but you get what I'm saying. It's a transactional culture where results matter over relationships. It's more of a blame, make a mess environment. I talked about 68% of people, their default behavior is to avoid. Well, the other 32% in that tough conversation when somebody's getting defensive, instead of avoiding, they attack, they make a mess, they blame, which I sometimes fall into that category. You have to endure toxic bad apples because they get results. Well, bad apples, toxic bad apples, they might get top performance, but they can derail the performance of a team by 30 to 40%. The trap of groupthink is people are afraid to speak up because their ideas might get shot down. It's a high anxiety, high burnout culture. It can get results over the short term, but it's not sustainable over the long term. All right, let's think about the bottom right-hand culture. This is a low courage but high connection. That's your family culture. It's a nice culture, but people are unwilling to do hard things. It's more of an avoidance culture. There's less accountability, lower adherence to standards because we don't want to upset people. We want to be nice. It's slower decision making because everybody has to be included and everybody has to be happy. And there's nothing wrong with consensus decision making, but at some point in time, and you want inclusion, but at some point in time, somebody has to make the decision, and not everybody can always be happy. And the trap of groupthink is people are hesitant to speak up. Now, we have some clients proudly say they're a family, and there are many positive aspects of a family culture, but you can't fire your lowest performing family member. You might want to, but you can't. And we do say that connection comes before courage. So you want connection. It's great to have a high care, high trust, a nice culture that's good to build on, but it's not good enough in terms of high performance. Okay, the lower left, we see a lot less of this these days. This is your old fear-based, command and control, hierarchical. There's not a lot of risk-taking. It's very inconsistent behavior and lots of bad apples. All right, where you want to get to is you want to get to the upper right-hand quadrant, which is a last 8% culture that's characterized by high accountability and high care. It's not one or the other. There's high trust and smart risk-taking. It's okay to fail. It's okay to make mistakes. It's a feedback-rich culture, and it isn't just the manager to the employee. It's the team giving feedback to each other. And by the way, managers love to hear this because it means they don't have to give the feedback if the team are holding themselves accountable. It's a great environment to be in as a leader. It's a balance of results and relationship. Again, it's not one or the other, and it's high experimentation and high innovation. All right, so Marcus, as you look at this map and as you saw this for the first time, what came to mind for you?
I thought immediately about teams, about sports teams,
Yeah.
right? Sports teams the people on the team, they get traded, in the middle of the season, or maybe at the end of every season, there's some changes. So by their very nature, you're not, inherently owed a place here. You might leave. So that takes a stab or takes a jab at this idea of we are a family. So no, we are a team together right now, operating in such a way to be the best versions of ourselves. And therefore, I have accountability to my team to be great.
Yeah.
Because if I'm not, then I might be asked to leave. Now, the team wants me to succeed because my success means our collective success. And therefore, the team was much more likely to give me feedback because they know that my improvement means our improvement. And I think the teams that are most successful are those who operate in that top right quadrant
Yeah.
because they know that the collective is better when everyone is better. However, we know that the only way to keep getting better is the constant improvement, and we need sort of feedback. We need pushes and encouragement,
Yeah.
right? So such that we get better at it. Now, encouragement through criticism, encouragement through destructive means only draws the collective ability of the team to work together down, right? So it has to be done with high care, but still be done in such a way that leads to better outcomes, which gets us a big difference between the last 8% and the fear-based culture.
Yes, absolutely. Interesting that you mentioned sports teams. So again, our founder, my business partner, Dr. J.P. Fry, in the 90s worked with the mental training coach for the Chicago Bulls. And we all know the Bulls from the 90s, right? It was Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, and Phil Jackson. And he tells a story of, at the end of a game or at halftime, they'd go in and there'd always be one person who would start and say, here's where I messed up. And we'd always ask, well, who was that? And a lot of people would say, oh, it's Michael Jordan. It wasn't. It's actually Phil Jackson. He would start with, I could have made a better substitution here. I could have called a timeout here. I could have challenged that call. I shouldn't have got a technical. And when he does that, he takes accountability for himself. What does that elicit from everyone else? Well, then they jump in and they say, I should have done this and I should have done this. And so it's such a great example of high care and high accountability together. To me, that was such great modeling.
And I think it's perfectly stated because that's the job of leadership. It's to model the culture. It's to model the conventions and expectations of the group, right? Like culture is co-created. It is negotiated and constructed by the people, right? When leaders push a culture, those are called rules. Those are called laws that are pushed down on you. But when culture is fostered, it is negotiated, constructed by the people. And the job of leadership is to preach the gospel of the beliefs and ideologies of the group, the community, the organization, the team, the like, but also, and perhaps even more importantly, is to model it in their behaviors such that they inspire other people to do it as well.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to come off the share here because we do have a question. And by the way, feel free to throw any questions. Trish says, can you restate the second model? I'm not sure what she meant by the second model. That's about 17 minutes ago. So Trish, if you want to restate do you know what the second model is? Dr. Collins, do you know what she's talking about when she says the second model?
Do you mean the second model of the framework? Maybe
she says that's okay, not to worry about it. She says we. Okay, all right, thanks, Trish. Okay,
Yeah.
then we do have another question, I think, in the chat. Lindsay says, gotta go back. The best way to invest in the last 8%, build in time to sit with it, let people lean in, communication, trying to build bonds. I don't know whether I'll answer your whole question there, but like anything, it starts with yourself. So it really starts with being aware of what are your last 8% moments? What are your triggers? Like what causes you to suddenly be in a last 8% moment? And there's two types. There's the unanticipated, where you thought you were having a good day and suddenly someone's coming at you, an email, something happened, your car broke down, whatever. And then there's the anticipated ones where you're planning for it, or this is going to be a difficult decision or a tough conversation. And so it's really about recognizing for yourself and understanding your triggers and what are your default behaviors. Are you more of an avoider or more of a make a messer? And what strategies can you deploy in order to try to show up more skillfully? So it starts with self. And then, yes, recognizing it in others, getting to know people. What are their triggers? What's likely to be difficult for them? And can you sit with them and can you validate, not agree or give in? People confuse validating with agreeing and giving in, but sit with them and acknowledge and validate. So I don't know if I totally answered your question there, Lindsay, but that's what comes to mind from that question.
And I love to underscore that, like that idea of validating people. I mean, this is just a practice of empathy, is being able to realize that people see the world through their own meaning-making systems, their own culturally constructed lenses. And therefore, the way you may perceive it may be one way, but the way they perceive it is something completely different. There's three forms of empathy, as the literature tells us. There is semantic empathy, that's like automatic empathy, i.e., Bill, if I saw you slam your hand in the door, I go, "Oh, Bill, you okay? Whoo, I felt that with you." Right? Semantic empathy is about feeling with someone. But then there is affective empathy. Right. And semantic empathy is automatic. Like, unless you're a sociopath, like we all do it. But
Yeah.
affective empathy is this idea of doing to others as you want done unto you, right? The golden rule, as it were,
Yeah.
right? So if you're having a bad day, Bill, I'll reach out and say, "Bill, you doing well, man? I just want to check in on you because that's what I want you to do for me." But there's one layer, one level higher, and that is cognitive empathy.
Yes.
And cognitive empathy is a twist on the golden rule. They call it the platinum rule often.
Yeah.
It's do unto others as they want
They
done unto
need to,
them.
yes, as they need to.
So if Bill's having a bad day, Bill, I may reach out to you, but you may be the kind of person that says, "When I have a bad day, I just want space." And as I'm reaching out to you, like, "Bill, you good? What's happening, Bill? Can I do something for you, Bill? What can I do?" You're like, "Leave me alone." And we find ourselves out of sync. And the idea of having cognitive empathy is being able to understand how other people see the world, even if it's not what you would want or not what you would want
Yeah.
to have done to you. And
Yes.
understanding that, it enables us to say, "Okay, this is how Bill sees the world. This is what he needs." So when I'm giving him some feedback, when I'm trying to help him, sort of level up such that he is
Yeah.
a at the operating at this highest fidelity possible in his potential, I need to make sure that I deliver it this way because of how he hears things and how he translates things. And I like to think someone just said it, that it's just a form of respect. It's a form
Yeah.
of respecting someone by providing them the empathy that they need so that they can hear things and translate them through their meaning making system, or say differently, they can translate them through their cultural lenses.
Absolutely. Adrian, there was a good question from Kim and a good question from Enrico. I'm going to save those till the end because we actually have a poll that we want to get to. So as you think about this culture, I want you to think about the team that you're on, not your whole organization, but the team that you're on. And we're going to bring up a poll here. What's the culture on your team? And again, this is anonymous. There's no big brother looking at this. So are you more of a transactional kind of results matter over relationships? Is it more family? It's a nice culture, but people aren't doing tough things. Is it fear-based? Or is it a last 8% culture? There is a balance of high care and high accountability. So we're going to give you all, just kind of 30 seconds to put in your votes, and we'll see what we get. And then we have actually some data to share from our research. So we'll see how close of a cohort you are to our research.
I'm so intrigued. I can't wait to see what this is going to be. The
I know.
suspense is killing me.
I know. Me too. Me too.
And I love the questions that are being asked here, by the way. It
Oh,
says a
love
lot to me, at least, that the folks in the webinar are thinking about these concepts deeply. And perhaps they have interrogated them themselves in their work. And the hope in all of this is that we provide, or we can sort of unearth some language, a perspective by which they can see their work and be better at it.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely right. I mean, the richness of the questions are showing that people are really listening and thinking about it. Okay,
Yeah.
Olivia, you can go ahead and close the poll, and let's see the results. All right, so 70% transactional, 41%. Yep, the lion's share are family. Fear-based, very low. I'm pleased to hear that. That's a tough environment. For those of you that are there, by the way, that's a tough environment to be in. And last 8%, that's good, about a third, which goes to show it's actually difficult to be in a last 8% culture. So let me show you our data from our clients, which by the way is very similar. So 18% transactional, 16% fear-based, actually a little more than even this group. And now this group actually self-selected to be here. So this group kind of believes in the value of culture. So it doesn't surprise me that they're a little less fear-based. 37% family. Again, a little less, family was 44 with this group, but again, you're all self-selected to be here. And 29%, very similar to last 8%. Now, a lot of our clients who are in the last 8% culture are in the upper right-hand quadrant, are just barely over the line in courage. So they're in the last 8% culture, but their good to great opportunity is still to increase courage. Like the high performance opportunity is to increase. So that's what we're seeing. And any thoughts on that data, Marcus?
Well, I'm encouraged that at least people are feeling connected, considering how much time and effort and energy we invest into our careers, that we invest into our workplace, for people to feel like they're connected to something. I think that's good. That gives me some sense of hope, which hopefully for everyone on the webinar joining us here, it sort of says, okay, now all we have to do is kind of move one step up, increase our courage such that we're able to operate in this high accountability and high care space by operating in the last 8%. It'd be far harder to have no connection or low connection and then also have to be brave in an environment where you feel like it's toxic, or that the repercussions, the social consequences, the professional consequences may be too great for one to even risk trying to be courageous.
Yeah, and I mean, and the opportunity, and because as I said, we like to say that connection comes before courage, and then the opportunity to then kind of tie that into the strategic outcomes, because from an organizational perspective, culture exists to drive strategy, culture exists to drive business outcomes, right? So then to tie that, one of our good clients, Blue Cross of Idaho, a couple of their key drivers are to be a destination employer of choice, to attract and retain great people, to be more innovative. Again, you need people taking risks. You need people being okay to make mistakes. And so, to make that connection between, if we are higher courage, right, we're going to achieve more of our business outcomes and drive strategy. Okay, I'm going to do the last content piece, and then we'll get to the questions, because there's lots of great questions here. But this, the kind of the last thing I just want to discuss is this idea of balancing care and accountability. And there isn't actually a slide on this, but I just, Marcus, I knew you and I would have a good conversation on this, because just going back to this slide, if you want to create a culture that's high in courage and connection, that's high in care and accountability, that really is about managing emotions. And again, for those of you that know IHHP for the last 25 years, we've been doing work in this area of emotional intelligence. And we talked earlier about the idea that in those last 8% moments, it's the emotional system that releases those chemicals, the cortisol, that moves us to our fight or flight behaviors. And so if you as an individual or you have a team and you want to be better at managing these last 8% moments and being high care and high accountability, it's really about managing emotions.
And that's a hard thing for us to kind of get our heads around, because I think, especially in a business setting, we like to think about ourselves as rational beings. We think of ourselves as like, no, I use data to make my decisions. I'm a data-driven animal. That's kind of how we like to perceive ourselves in the world. But everything we know about humanity, the underlying physics of humanity, is that we are emotional beings. We're rationalizing beings, not rational beings. And therefore, most of our decisions are made in an emotional state, right? So understanding the emotions that are in us and being able to connect with people in a way that evokes emotion leads to safety, leads to trust, leads to connection. And to your point, we can't get to courage if we aren't connected, right? There's no psychological safety for us to ultimately be courageous in those spaces. So understanding the humanity in us, I think, is part and parcel to not only to leadership, but to fostering the culture of high performing teams, high performing organizations.
What you just said actually speaks to two questions that just came up. Rachel said, would like to understand strategies for dealing with a transactional team who is not motivated to change. And Enrico says, it seems to me that you cannot move from top left to top right. So from transactional to last 8%. And I would actually challenge that and say, actually, you can. And we have worked with teams and organizations where they are more transactional. And the thing you have to remember is that 98% of humans in organizations are actually genuine, caring, empathetic human beings. Okay, there's the 1 or 2% that are sociopaths. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about the 98% of people. Now, they've learned over time to be more transactional, to be more hardcore, to be more focused. But when you really break it down, and so how you reach those people is with the brain science and with the research. So if I'm with a group of surgeons or a group of auditors or a group of lawyers who don't see the value in empathy, don't see the value in connection, I just start with the research that shows the impact of a more empathetic leader, the impact of connection. And then when you share the brain science of what happens to someone's brain when they don't feel valued, when they don't feel trusted, when they don't feel connection, and it shuts them down. So yes, Rachel and Rico, you can actually move someone from transactional, even from fear-based, because everyone at their foundation is actually a basically good human being and does care about others. They just don't understand the negative impact of that behavior. And once they do, then they can change.
That's right. And you got to meet them where they are, essentially.
Yeah. That's really what that's about. And appealing to, again, a lot of time, again, because I have degrees in mathematics, computer science, and because you were an engineer, we end up in those highly analytical audiences who value science and numbers and data and analytics, and sometimes don't understand and haven't learned the value of those things. Like I said, I'm literally going to the Naval Information Wartime Center in San Diego at the end of April to work with them on these skills, because they recognize the leadership there, recognize the values for their people. So I did want to kind of answer those couple questions.
Well, the interesting part about that is that, having an analytical, quantitative background actually helps me be much more empathetic when it comes to those kind of leaders, right? Like, I studied engineering, materials engineering undergrad. I went back to school to get my MBA. And at the time, after I left business school, I was running social for an advertising agency. I was the thought leader for all things social. And I remember going to dinner with my wife's friend from college who was a social worker. And at dinner, she would say, in social, we do this, social, we do that. I thought to myself, why does she keep saying that? Because I say the exact same thing as a marketer. I go, in social, we do this, in television, you do that, in television, radio, you do this, in social, you do that. And I go, oh, because socialist people, duh, social work, social justice, social action, it's all people. And I had to look inside myself and realize I knew nothing about people.
Yeah.
And it took me sort of investing myself in understanding the behavioral sciences, investing myself in this work to understand it. And once I did, the byproduct, the results of my work had a hockey stick growth, right? Not because I'm so good, but because of my ability to see the world through lenses that are not my own. I think it cannot be understated or overstated. Being able to see the world through the cultural lenses of other people opens up a world to you that normally would be opaque. And having the clarity of seeing people for who they are allows us to connect with them because of who they are.
Absolutely. I'll just sum up this point. I'll actually let Julia sum up this point. She said, it really sounds like building EQ is the #1 needle mover to get to that last 8% quadrant. Absolutely. Whether you're moving over, up, or diagonally over, EQ is the driver. It's the #1 needle. Okay, so Adrian, if you could maybe just bring us back. I've lost track with all the chats of a couple of the questions. If you don't mind jumping on and just reminding me of a couple of the questions that we passed by.
Yeah, sure, Bill. I can help with that. There's been a lot of questions that have come through. Some really, really good questions.
Well, just
one of the other questions that came in was, can you give me an example of a company where you've helped them move from being a family culture to a last 8% culture?
Oh, that's let me think. We got a few. Blue Cross of Idaho. So they're the healthcare provider in Idaho. they started with their very senior team. We work my business partner JP worked with their senior team, and then we have this culture system where we work with them over a 6 to 9 month period. One of the cool things about the culture system is we have some very short bite-sized learning activities. I mean, the days of full day training programs where people go away and then come back and forget 90% of what they thanks Travis. BCI represents. And they did a process we call the sprints, where we actually bring the learning to where the culture happens, which is at the team level in the flow of work. And they've been just such a great client, modeling from the senior team right down to doing the sprints with all their teams. And we've actually seen that we did a pre-assessment, a post-assessment. We've seen the needle change, and actually that question set me up perfectly, because we actually do have a quote from them. Their CEO Paul Zerlo said the impact of the last 8% culture system on our employee retention is significant. We've gone from a 17.5% turnover rate to an 11% turnover rate in the past year and a half. When we talk about that turnover rate going from a ratio of losing 250 people a year to half of that is real money, close to $10 million if you really look at it. Now, I can guarantee you they didn't spend $10 million with us. So that's just a great example of a client where we've had that kind of impact. So thank you to whoever put that question in there. All right, what else, Adrian? We got some time for a few more questions.
Yeah, there's another good one here, Bill. What are some of the key factors to driving culture change in an organization?
Marcus, do you want to take that one?
Absolutely. What I found is that the biggest driver to this is belief. It's ideology. It's belief and ideology. I've been fortunate enough to work with McDonald's for a considerable part of my career. Most recently, as a chief strategy officer at Wieden Kennedy, the agency I worked at before I released my book. And McDonald's at one time, I mean, they were the punching bag for everything wrong with the American diet, one of the most hated companies in the country, according to polls. But McDonald's had a massive turnaround in the last 4 or 5 years, because they decided to focus on understanding people, not seeing them as customers, but seeing them as fans, and understand what it means to be a fan. And as they were able to, with our agency's help, were able to sort of glean this understanding, McDonald's then realized that they weren't able to operationalize against or act against these learnings, because as an organization, their culture wasn't situated as such they had the capabilities to move against it. So McDonald's had to move from looking at people as as consumers, look at them as fans. They had to move from thinking about fans as people they can control, and they control the message, to instead sharing the pin, realizing that we do these things together. And then lastly, they had to embrace the courage of creativity, doing things that were antithetical to the dominant logic of their category and how they've always done things. No matter how much they would have learned about the customer, they would have never been able to tap into these truths and leverage them to their benefit without being able to change. And that change required them changing the way that they see the world. The way we see the world informs the way that we behave in the world. And those what makes seem subtle and slight on the surface have unbelievable ramifications on how you show up.
By the way, there are many different factors, but I'm going to agree with you. Number one is belief. Starting with the senior leadership team, but all the way down through the organization. All right, well, Marcus, you and I could spend the next 2 hours talking about this. I know we didn't get everyone's questions. We're going to sort of do a closeout. But then Marcus and I'll stay on afterward. I don't know. I didn't even ask you if you could stay on for a few extra minutes to answer some of the questions.
It's all good.
But we'll stay on to answer some of for those that can stay on. But for those that need to drop off the hour. Okay, here's where you can get the culture map and exercise. Now I know that's a long link. So Olivia or Adrian are actually going to put that link in the chat, so you don't have to actually type that out. That's where you can get a copy of the last 8% culture map, and an exercise you can actually do with your team. Whether you're the leader or you're on the team and you say, hey, I attended this cool webinar and I want to talk to you guys about what kind of team we are. And it's also about not what kind of team you are, but what's the good to great opportunity, right? How do you move farther up into the last 8% in the upper right-hand quadrant, or move out of family, whatever your opportunity is. All right. At that website, you can learn more about Marcus. You can get a copy of the book. Both Marcus and I are on LinkedIn, and we're both very active. So reach out to us, connect. We love sharing kind of our favorite latest research and things we're up to. Huge thank you, first of all, to Adrian and Olivia on the team here for organizing everything. I have to thank Big Speak, our partner. Both Marcus and I work very closely with them. They book us and get us out there on the road. We love our good friends from Big Speak. Huge thank to you, Marcus. Pleasure to work with you. And thanks to everyone here for joining us and being super engaged. We could do this all day. So huge thanks to everyone involved. All right.
Thank you all so much. Appreciate you.
Okay. All right. Adrian, for those that want to stay on, what were some of the additional questions that we didn't get a chance to answer?
There's one here from Paul. He said, what do you do when leadership doesn't believe people don't feel safe because leaders themselves feel comfortable?
Say that again. What do we do when
leadership doesn't believe people don't feel safe because the leaders themselves feel comfortable?
I'm not sure I understand that question. Marcus, are you tracking on that one?
If I'm following, I think it's that what do you do when the leaders don't feel like people don't feel safe? Like leaders are like, no, everybody's good. It's no worries. What is the problem? People feel safe. People are good to go when they're sort of ignoring all the feedback I imagine they're getting. Does that sound about right, Adrian, that what we're getting at?
I think so, Marcus. Sounds about right.
Yeah. So in those cases, I mean, I think there's two things that happens, two things that can happen. One, the leadership continues to be oblivious and they find themselves in a scenario where there's high attrition, or obliteration of the organization. Everyone just sort of leaves. On the other end, I think that it requires sort of shining the light on the challenges that it happens. I think to Bill's point, that maybe for those leaders, you have to be much more quantitative in the way that you present the empirical evidence, as opposed to sort of the anecdotes, the qualitative. And it's typically hard for people to say no when it's there in print, or it's there in a quantitative manner. It's much easier for people to shake off the qualitative. And I say that as a qualitative researcher, so I understand how those things can be challenging. So oftentimes you have to marry one with the two. If not, you find yourself in a really bad scenario.
That's actually exactly what I was going to say. Is there a way to get some data? Is there a way to get some survey data, research, something to show the impact or the actual, data? There was a question Kim had earlier up for Marcus. I don't know if you can find that. I was looking for it, and Kim, if you're still on, I apologize that we missed that one.
Yeah, I found it here. It says, love the curation of curiosities and artifacts in your background, Dr. Collins. So he says, question for you both. Given that culture is generally rooted in a common set of anchoring beliefs, as you said, how can organizations successfully invite, foster, and grow diversity amongst their team while continuing to preserve the defined culture within, whether culture is existing or aspirational?
Oh, I love that. In my mind, I think about this is that we believe a truth about the world. That is our belief, right? Our shared acceptance of reality. But the manner in which we go about realizing that truth, that's where we get diversity. That's where heterogeneity comes from, right? We all believe that every human body is an athlete if you're Nike, right? But the manner in which athleticism is achieved differs. And the only way to understand all the many ways in which all the different permutations in which athleticism or achieving athleticism differs requires having different points of view about how the world manifests, even though we all believe the same thing. So we get diversity in perspective, yet we share the same collective understanding of what is true.
Interesting. I knew that was a very thoughtful question that you would enjoy. I remember seeing it and thinking, wow, that's a meaty question. That's a deep question that I'm gonna let Marcus answer at the end. That's right up your alley. All right. Okay. Adrian, do we have anything else? I know we're past our time.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot. There's
Awesome.
maybe one last one from Mindy. She
Okay.
says, why do you feel that you can't have a high connection and high courage in a family culture? Many family cultures are able to have the hard conversations and hold people accountable.
Yeah, I mean that's just definitional then. So we are saying that in that low connect in that high connection but low courage, we're calling that a family. If you have a family that is willing to have the tough conversations, name the inconvenient truths, that's one of the things in our assessment, gives each other skillful feedback, holds each other accountable, then yes, that is a family that is the last 8% culture. So it's really definitional in that case, was what I would say to that. But most people would say that, yeah, in our family, we're not always giving each other feedback. We're not always holding each other accountable. We're not always naming inconvenient truths. We're not always, so it's a bit of, the majority. So there certainly can be a minority where that is happening. So we're kind of playing on the majority there. That sound fair, Marcus?
Yeah, I completely agree.
Okay. All right. Good question though. I like that question, Mindy, if she's still on. All right. Well, listen, let's wrap things up. Again, Adrian and Olivia, thanks for all your support. Marcus, absolute pleasure. It's been fun getting to know you through this process. And again, for the Big Speak folks that are still on, you guys are awesome. And everyone have a great day. And we wish you all the best in showing up with courage and connection.
Take care. Love you guys, Big Speak. You're the best.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Bye,
Ciao.
everyone.